Hello guys, in today's tutorial, I'm going to talk about how to make this scope effects using shader. Before we start, let's download the texture file of our scope. You can download it from the link of the description. Okay, before we import to the engine, let's open it by using Paint and click Save. The reason of doing this is because we need to remove the alpha channel of the image. And then we can just open a new folder and I'm going to call it Scope. Open it, you can just drag and drop directly to the directory. Next, let's create our new material. I'm going to call it m_scope. Open it and change the blend mode from opaque to translucent and undrag the base color node. Set the RGB channel to the opacity and let's preview it in the plane mode. And you may see that this is not our desired input. The black area becomes transparent because the RGB channel of black is 0, so that it will mark the opacity of this black area to 0 and it is transparent. We need to invert it so that we can just use the 1 minus node so that the white space becomes black and black becomes white. And let's check out the result. Okay, this is our nice scope and we need to create a new parameter. I'm going to call it scope opacity to handle the opacity change and multiplied by the 1 minus node and jet out to set the opacity and click save. Okay, next let's modify our HUD. In first person BP, blueprints first person HUD, and we can remove this area because we don't need the crosshair anymore. And I'm going to create a new node called event begin play. Open it and create material dynamic material instance. And the parent should be our material m_scope. And then I'm going to promote to a variable. In this variable, and I'm going to call it scope material. And create another new material called scope opacity. The variable type should be float. Okay, and then we need to draw our material. Draw material. And the material should be our scope material. Sorry. And then drag out here. And I'm going to set the screen width to the size X and size Y to be the screen height. It will automatically convert integer to the float and set the material U width to 1 and the V height to 1. Next, set the scope opacity of the scope material. We can just set scalar parameter value and drag out here. And the parameter name should be scope opacity. Need to be very exactly correct. And click compile, save. Next, let's create our new key binding. In the input section of the project setting, add a new action mapping. And I'm going to call it M down site and set the value to right mouse button and close it. Go to first person character blueprint. In any empty area, right click and select M down site action events. When we press, we need to set the opacity to 0 to 1. When we release, we need to set the 1 to 0. So that we need to add a timeline. Add timeline. And the timeline, and I'm going to call it scope timeline. Open it. And we need to add a new flowchart, and I'm going to call it our scope opacity. Set the length to 0.25 and click left shift and left click the mouse, select 2 points. The first point, the time should be 0 and the value should be 0. And the next point should be 0.25 of our length and value should be 1. We can zoom to fit it to make it more easy for us to see, and we can just add some interpolation to make it action more smoothly. Okay, next compile. Go back to our event graph. We need to get our HUD and set the opacity so that we need to get our player controller, get HUD, and we need to cast to first person HUD. Check out the update session. We can just set scope opacity, drag in and set it. When we release, we need to reverse from the end and press it, play from the start. Okay, let's click compile save and then let's go to our session. Okay, you can see that, oh, I missed something. The camera should be zoomed accordingly. Okay, final, let's create the logic about zooming. First, open our first person character blueprint. Next, check the field of view of our camera. The default should be 90 and drag out our camera and set field of view. And after we set the opacity, we need to set the field of view. We need to change the field of view from 90 to a low value. For instance, 30, 20. The lower value you get, the more zooming effect you get. So that we can just, let's go back to our timeline, add a new flowchart called FOV, and left shift and left click the mouse. The first point should be 0 and 90. And second point should be 0.25, the length. And the value, you can customize it, but I advise maybe 50. But now, if you set to 20, the zooming is more effective. So that let's click compile and go back to our event graph. Drag out the FOV to set field of view. Compile save. Let's check out the result. You can see that okay, the zooming is smoothly. If you want to increase the zooming, of course you can increase. Go back to our timeline and zoom to fit so that make us more easy to see. We can just set to 15. Maybe these are all in CS:GO. You can just set more great so that you can see that the zooming effect is okay right now. If you're interested in other topics, please subscribe my channel. Thank you.